You're listening to the Higher Attitudes Podcast. Inspiration to lift your soul. You need to reboot. Warning, this episode does contain some geek speak. This is Tom. Please don't skip to the next show just yet. I promise to keep the geek stuff to a minimum. But the title I chose for this show is a bit techie with that whole word reboot. But most of us know what this is all about, don't we? We've used computers. And when your computer hasn't been shut down for a few days or weeks or, months, it starts to get confused. It runs slower, or certain programs stop working, or it glitches a lot. Oops, another tech term, huh? And when you ask a tech-savvy friend about it, they ask you if you have turned off the computer and turned it back on again. And you think, really? Do you think it's as easy as all that? And your techie friend will say, well, yes, actually. Sometimes that's exactly what a computer needs, a reboot. Just turn it off and turn it back on. Now, you might even try that with your smartphone as well. After all, that phone is nothing more than an amazing pocket computer. Big or small, you have to shut them down and turn them back on and watch them work. Sometimes that's all it takes. In fact, most of the time, that makes a big difference. And it pretty much works the same way with us humans. A few years ago, I worked for a large corporation. The computer I was given to use was loaded with antivirus programs, security protocols, and a host of other scanners that worked together to ensure the data on my machine remained intact and private. Such is the world we live in. It's true that all of these extra programs caused my computer to run slower, but it was the worst when I had to restart the computer. And that's exactly why I didn't restart my computer very often. I would leave it running day after day. And when it would crash or run so poorly that I had to reboot or restart it, I dreaded how long it would take. Sometimes it was 20 minutes before I could start to work again. So while I waited, did I do something productive? Once in a while, perhaps, but mostly I would tap my fingers and fuss that it was taking so long. Come on, I would say. It's that same feeling that I get when I get stuck in traffic and I'm running late. And so when the computer was up to full speed again, I found that I always felt antsy and irritated and feeling way behind. So when I stop working at full speed, or when I crash completely, I too need a reboot. Like my computer or phone, I feel it coming on, the stress, feeling like there is more to do than hours in the day or the week. Somehow, even though I'm learning to recognize the signs of impending burnout, I still think I can work through it. And so I try to do just that, usually to my chagrin. It would be so much easier if I took time to reboot more regularly, but I often don't take enough time. I allow myself to do more than I have strength. And right before it all comes apart and I shut down involuntarily, I continue to try to find a way to avoid needing to undergo an emotional and spiritual reboot. After all, they're so inconvenient, so time-consuming. But eventually, if I ignore the signs and I don't reboot involuntarily, then I shut down. I stop caring if I can do it all anymore. I finally take time because I essentially have no other choice. I'm doing good at this point if I haven't bawled anyone out or burned any bridges with family and friends. And frankly, I don't know if computers enjoy it as much as I do, but when I finally hit that power button and shut it all down, it feels really good. Better than I expected. I feel better, for about a day. And then I try to get right back to overdoing it. And I get frustrated because I'm just not feeling it. I struggle with motivation, and I question my motives and just about everything else. It's like sitting impatiently before my computer, fussing as to why it's taking so long to get back up to speed. And all of my frustration, irritation at my slowness to get going again, all of this does absolutely nothing to help me personally during my reboot process. In fact, it probably slows everything down. So, let's talk about how we reboot, how we recover when the world sits on us like a big boulder threatening to squeeze the air out of our lungs. How long do we need to lay there under the boulder before we struggle to get out from underneath of it? Or back to our computer thing, how long until we try to reboot and debug and get everything humming again? Earlier, I said that when my phone or laptop is rebooting, I often sit and fidget, waiting for everything to come back up. And then I try working before the computer has finished loading everything it needs to run properly. And doing this only frustrates me more, and I don't get anything done, not really. Often, after we take a day to relax and reboot a little, we think we are ready to go again. But like my computer, we are not really ready. It's times like these that give us the opportunity to examine how we are living and taking care of ourselves. God has commanded us not to run faster than we have strength. Perhaps this is a commandment that I can do better at. Many of us could. God understands that if we run faster than we really have strength to do, we'll only slow down our long-term progress. If we crash again and again by living life at breakneck speeds, we'll progress slower than if we pursue the race at a quick but steady pace. Here are some ideas about how to make your next reboot process smoother and perhaps a bit longer, but ultimately more of a true reset that we all sometimes need. First, start by sleeping in. Often when we get overwhelmed, a lack of sleep is part of the problem. Maybe this can be solved by sleeping in one morning, but often the exhaustion we feel is caused by long-term sleep deprivation. Getting 1 to 2 hours less sleep than we need on a regular basis takes more than one normal night of sleep, or even one longer night of sleep than usual, to recover from. Next, typically we need to rediscover the scriptures. When life gets crazy and you are busy, you may let even a long-standing habit of reading scripture lapse. Or, if you are a diehard reader, you may push too hard and find that you are no longer being nourished by your reading and study. If we notice this happening, some of us will double down, thinking that more time in the scriptures will help us get through the bog we seem to be caught in. It may work, or it may help us sink a bit faster. Anyway, if we have let the habit of letting God's words and the words of His prophets into our lives, we need to take time and make room again. Don't try to make up for lost time. Just start reading again or listening if you have access to the scriptures in an audio format. Just be present with the words and don't worry about understanding exactly what each verse means. There will surely be time for deep, thoughtful, inquisitive study. But for now, just allow the scriptures to gain a foothold again in your life. Next comes prayer. You need to begin talking with God again. No need to pretend here. Sometimes we talk at God instead of with God. We pray and give thanks, but our hearts are not completely invested in the process. This is a perfectly normal human thing to do. So start by telling God you've been away and you're not sure why you let it happen, or how you let it go on for as long as you did. I've done this more than a few times, and from my experience, I've found that God understands. When I can just let go of the posturing, which is when I try to convince God how regretful I am that I have let myself be more distant or distracted than I meant to be, I find that I'm really trying to console myself because it feels really good to reconnect with God. And I don't want to think that I'll lose that again eventually. And frankly, I fear that someday God will get tired of me promising to stay close and always falling short. But that's not His way. He will always be there when we come back. It's part of the miracle. And when we do, we'll find that God has again and again taught us something more. And our wanderings will slowly decrease, and our desire to stay close longer will increase. And we will find ourselves willing to bind ourselves more tightly to God through the promises we do keep. And we'll find that we are keeping more and more promises for longer and longer. And then we will know that God's patient work of redemption is taking place within us. And that miracle will be enough to humble us in a most personal way. And we will find ourselves being more patient when we need to reboot. And we will be more patient with others. And we will start encouraging others when we see that they need a fresh start. Here are just a few more things that I find can help in our personal reboot process. Recognize when you have reached a point of exhaustion and be kind to yourself by recognizing the work you have done and the faithfulness that you have already exhibited. It does us no good to focus only on the things we don't accomplish. Next, rejoice that you have had strength to contribute to God's kingdom. Resist falling into a semi-depressive state because you cannot continue pressing on as hard as you have been. Resist blaming yourself or accusing yourself for doing something wrong that has led you to this point of burnout or exhaustion. Sometimes it's just a lot of hard work and a lot of time invested that gets us there. And our only real problem is not giving ourselves more time to relax, recuperate, and recover. Take the time you need to catch your breath and regain your strength. Examine fairly your actions that led up to your exhaustion and recognize your efforts to be balanced and your intention to run and walk at a sustainable pace. Recognize that it is your adversary that tries to make your efforts seem inadequate and your lack of energy to continue a thing of shame. Rejoice in the work you have been able to accomplish. Note it, recognize it, and allow the Spirit to confirm it. And as you begin again, do so with gratitude and humility and a desire for learning and instruction from God. So I have one last computer analogy for you before I end this show. You know how sometimes when you restart a computer, the operating system automatically updates some of the software on the computer? What if God does the same thing, but only in a much more miraculous way? That's what we've actually been talking about. Each time we crash and reboot, He teaches us that if we let Him, He will upgrade our attitudes and our patience and our empathy so that we don't mind so much when we need a break. If we become aware of God's upgrades, we might even start rebooting before we crash and are forced to. And I think that is what God is trying to get us to realize. He loves us enough to work with us, listen to us, help us constantly and continually. Oh, that we might rest as needed. And may we soak up the Spirit of God through the Scriptures and come unto Him in prayer often and without fear of displeasure. Remember to give yourself the divine gift of regular reboots in life. And when you do, remember that God is always there, waiting to hear from you. Thank you for listening. We'd love to have you join us on Facebook at facebook.com/higher-attitudes. Do you have an uplifting thought to share? Why not join our Facebook discussion group? Visit the group at facebook.com/groups/higher-attitudes to request membership. If you'd like to leave a question about a challenge you're facing, or if you'd like to share a thought about how you've overcome negativity, call 719-301-0303 and record your question or comment. Please note that carrier rates may apply. Again, call 719-301-0303 to leave a question or comment. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we look forward to you joining us for the next episode of the Higher Attitudes podcast. Please remember that the advice offered in this show is intended for informational purposes only. Please read our full disclaimer in the show notes.